Welcome to the Dharma of Color, where we interview and support teachers and practitioners of color, and where everybody is welcome. Today we interview Chimyo Atkinson about working with people, staying in touch with the cold, the question, "Are you sure?" and more. For more information about the teacher and the channel, check the description below, and please enjoy. So welcome, Chimyo Atkinson, to Dharma of Color. Yes. So you've practiced a lot of places, Great Tree, Aichi, Ryomanji, Hokyoji. But before all that, what brought you to Zen life? We all have our practice stories.
Well, my practice story isn't so thrilling. When I was in college, I discovered meditation through a special presentation that was given to a college course that I took, and I was hooked on the meditation. It intrigued me. It made me feel better, which is how a lot of us come to Dharma practice, is seeking, the release from suffering, and which is pretty standard. And throughout the years, I just kind of fumbled my way around until I found myself at uh, a Zen. It's a Zen group, or it's a Zen sitting group in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I was working. That just happened to be Zen, and I met my teacher there. I met some of the people that I'm still practicing with 30 years later there. And after so many years of lay practice, I told my teacher I wanted to ordain, and without knowing what that meant, I did it. So that's kind of how I came to practice. It's not exciting.
Well, welcome to an unexciting practice, right? I guess it was fortunate.
Yeah.
It's not that exciting anyway. Was that that wasn't at Great Tree Women's Temple? Was that a smaller group or a smaller temple, or did you go straight and start practicing at Great Tree?
Well, Great Tree didn't exist yet. I was one of the founding members of Great Tree, actually. It was many years after I started sitting in Charlotte at the Charlotte Zen Meditation Society, which still exists. Still sitting in the same place all these years. And through them, I met my teacher. And for a while, she was a teacher for that group. She didn't have a center. And we practiced for a long time together and as a Sangha. And at a certain point, she decided she wanted to create Great Tree, which is a women's practice center. And some of us helped her to create that and practice there again for another slew of years. And through my connection with that center and that group, I began to practice as a monk, as an ordained person.
What's the practice life? What's the routine? Zen temples tend to have similarities, but what's the feeling there at Great Tree?
It's a very small place. It's not big and grand like San Francisco Zen Center. It's a very small place. And it's basically a house that had a room that made the perfect zendo, which is why it was chosen. And for the majority of the time, it was just me and my teacher living there. It's a residential place, but it's residential only for women. So if you want to be there long term, it's for women. It's not that men don't practice there doing sessions and retreats and things like that. But it's basically for women, and we've had women come and go over the years, but it's remained very small, so it's very intimate. There's not a whole lot of fanfare going on. We have our daily rituals, our morning sittings and morning ceremonies. We have session, which is we do every month, which is basically the meditation retreats, or they call it retreats. It's not really retreat. It shouldn't really be called retreat, but we have those every month, to which the public is invited. We have our basic, rituals that go on throughout the year, talks and classes, study groups. Right. In terms of my daily life, it's get up, ring the bell, fix the breakfast, that kind of thing. It's a monk's life. My teacher is or has been very traditional in her style. She practiced in Japan for 2 years, and that's what she brings back to Great Tree. So, in a sense, in as much as it can be traditional, it is. But the practical of it is that when there are only 2 people there, there's only so much you can do. So we kind of, adjust.
You are now in the city, and before I return to the Zendo and talk perhaps about being touched by the cold and your experience at Hokyoji, perhaps you want to just let us know, or let me and the DOC viewers know, how's that transition going from kind of living a temple life to living a city life?
In terms of what it actually is, it's fine. But the transition is not internally and practice-wise. It's very difficult. I have not set aside my vows, so I'm having this struggle of how do I do this and continue my practice as a Zen priest, in this situation. What is it? I'm always, we're all at this point in the middle of this pandemic trying to figure out what the next step is supposed to be. And supposed to be is one of those things that is one of the obstacles. It's like, I have no idea what this looks like, or what it's going to look like whenever I get there. So it's been, very difficult, very daunting, because I've been in practice at Great Tree for 10 years, over 10 years. And it was completely monastic, it wasn't closed, it wasn't cloistered or anything, but it was very much a schedule and very much a full-on practice every day. And being in the Bronx, and not having my container, because sometimes it's called a container of monastic practice. Honestly, I don't know how to do it. But it's working out. It's, as things open up, I think it will get better. I can see a little bit of clarity, possibly on the edge on that horizon. So I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I was going to ask you, I don't, now I'm getting off my own script. And I guess, right, that's, that's it. Once we, have to practice in the world, we have to sort of, now this practice is really important.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask you later in this conversation about how do we, practice in the world. And I wanted to sort of an intermediary step, Chimyo, was to talk about the difference between sitting shikantaza and then going and doing work period. And how do we practice, working with the Sangha. So perhaps you could just talk about that and talk about and then maybe we'll get back to sitting meditation. Can you give in the temple, in a Zen temple in particular, work period and working, doing the jobs of a practice center, let's call it, not a temple, monastery seems grandiose, but working with the Sangha, that's super important. Can you give me and us some advice on how to do work with people?
On how to work with people?
Yeah.
Well, in a sense, there's no separation between zazen. I heard several things going on in your question there. Zazen, everything is zazen. Zazen is bringing yourself to attention, to mindfulness. So sitting on the cushion, the same effort that we make sitting on the cushion to see clearly, to drop all of our delusions, to be completely in reality, is the same effort that happens when you get up and walk into the kitchen. The It's not as if we're just cultivating it, compassion and clarity in one way. Where when you meet that person in the kitchen, when you meet someone in the kitchen, you meet them with the same sort of effort and mindfulness that you are trying to grasp on the cushion, are trying to be on the cushion. It's not being one way here and another way there, or I don't know, building something on the cushion so that you have ammunition or whatever it is that we might have, or that you have some kind of knowledge that you're going to carry someplace else. It's the same. It's the same way of being in all places. So whatever you need, and also the realization doesn't come only on the cushion. Realization comes in that interchange between people. It comes in the way that you pick up the broom and the way um, take action, with the broom. It's in all of these things are opportunities for, if you want to call it enlightenment. There are opportunities for cultivating awareness and all of the quote unquote objectives of doing this practice. So practice isn't just one thing. Shikantaza is really important because it is that space that allows us to deeply see. But there are other spaces that allow us to see that as well. And we can't just, it's there. It's all an opportunity for practice and becoming and becoming showing our Buddha nature. It's all part of it. So there's no separation, no distinction between the two places or other places or many places. Yeah.
So I thank you for that reminder. And the cliche, of course, I don't even want to say the cliche that just came to my mind, but easier said than done, right? So we are in a zazen, and some negative self-thoughts or some negative thoughts towards others arise. I'm speaking from personal experience, but I'm also, I think, speaking, this is a common experience for everybody. And it's easy to let those move through, right, out the back door, or somewhat easy. But it's harder to do when you're in the kitchen and somebody isn't conforming to the way one wants things done, especially when one is the head cook or something like that. How do we, I'm perhaps asking you to repeat yourself, but how do we deal with it when we're face to face with people?
Well, all of our negative stuff comes up because of our delusion, our fear, our expectations of what's supposed to be. I saw recently, I can't remember the woman's name. She's a Thich Nhat Hanh monk, and she has a video on, it was a Plum Village video, maybe it might be. And one of the things that she said when she's talking about the same sort of thing, about all our ideas of what is supposed to be and how people are supposed to act and what's supposed to happen and why is this person making me unhappy? Because that's what it's about, you know. One of the things she said is, and I've heard this at Thich Nhat Hanh too, when you come up against that situation and you've decided that something is wrong or something is not the way it should be, or that someone is not acting in the way that you want them to, or is not the person you want them to be, she says to look at it and say, not to them, but to yourself, are you sure? Are you sure this is what is not supposed to be? Before you go and lay in on something, to just, and to me, that's like taking a step back and looking at what it is, what I'm doing with my thinking, what I'm putting onto the situation, before, you lay in and say that this is wrong, or this can't be, or this is messing things up, you know. Are you sure? And there's no answer to that. It's just that's pull back. And then to really step back and look at the situation as it is. It may be that something is not going to the best or to the optimum. But before that speech comes that, that turns the situation into a little bit of hell, or before your anger flares up, even if you don't even see anything, before you let that anger flare up and that pain of that anger and that fear and that ego come up, maybe just to take that breath and say, are you sure that this is how it has to be? Does it have to be the way I want it? You know, because the universe could give a shit what you want. But before you create that little bit of hell, you know, that creates all the hell that we are all, you know, swirling around us, you know, because it's created by us, take a step back and just see if you know, why is it not acceptable? You know, can I give this person a little bit of leeway to be a little bit not what I think is optimum? Can I give this person a little bit of room to make a mistake? Am I making the mistake? You know, all these questions could turn a single thing that, you know, that could turn, you know, those little bits of hell that turn people's days into, you know, total torture for no good reason, because it's all so small. Could be turned and just with putting that thought down, you know, for a minute, giving a little bit.
Yeah. And yes, just you sort of adding on and reiterate to I believe this nun's discussion in the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition. I have embarrassment. It often we're like, oh God, I can't believe I was even asked that question in this case. And of course, as we go through daily lives, we like, I listened to this person, and then I said, oh, this is who this person is. And they were nothing like, or their intention was nothing like what I had thought. And so thank you for that.
And that's the very importance of living a monastic life with other people and doing this practice with other people. That's the point. That's what you're practicing. Every time coming up against that and seeing it and putting it down. That's how compassion develops.
I have specific questions, but I want to follow you as best as I can. So right now in the world, we have this big problem with people not making assumptions. Of course, I'm thinking about all the tragic killings that have been happening, are happening. And I wanted to ask you, just we perhaps, or some people, people of color who are Buddhist, and everybody, if they so desire, is to speak out and speak to people. How do we do this? How can you give some advice on how to, what in my notes I have, speak truth to power, considering what we're just talking about putting down assumptions.
I don't know. I don't like the idea of advice. I can only tell you what I feel about it. The main thing about confronting, or I don't want to say confronting, addressing the things that are going on in the world that are causing so much suffering. The main thing of that is, as you said, to speak the truth, to be aware that lots of people, we are all deluded. And dropping delusion is painful for all of us. But that does not mean that we're supposed to back down and not address the situation. And when you do speak truth, there will be people who are going to react and basically strike out, because that calls to question their reality, the reality that they've created about themselves. Just like all of us have that. The reality they've created around themselves for their protection, for their what they think is their protection. It makes them unsafe because what they think is real, somebody else has a different idea or a different vision of what is real than they do. And so it's very difficult. We know that, and in our own hearts, when we deal with our own delusion, when we see ourselves, falling short of reality, when we see that we ourselves are the cause of others' suffering and our own suffering, that's hard to own. And so one reaction is to build more delusion around you. And that's what's causing the harm. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't, speak, because the only way to get past that delusion, to free ourselves from our own delusion, and hopefully to help others to free themselves from their delusion. Because no matter what we say, no matter what we do, we can't free another person from delusion. We can't show the Dharma to someone. They have to find it and embody it in themselves to really understand. But that doesn't mean that as bodhisattvas we don't that we shore up their delusional walls. We try to help them break it as much as we can. And that sounds so very violent. That's not what I mean to say, but I hope you know what I mean. So I don't know that that's advice, but this is what we do. And this is what I think Sangha practice is meant to help us learn and help us manifest, in the world.
I want to thank you for bringing up the Bodhisattva vows, just the concept, and the reminder that we're here to save ourselves and to save others is really touching. I don't know why. Perhaps it's obvious why, but just some basic reminders of how important it is to be human these days have been touching to me. And I think that because of the suffering of the American people and people of color, just reminders of basic humanity are just some of the basics that we need. I'd like to talk about pain. Going back to one of your talks, you were talking about the cold and Hokyoji, and you were saying how important it is to continue to be in touch with the cold, to be in touch with the pain of the cold. You were speaking literally and metaphorically. Could you talk about that and maybe just slightly wider discomfort in meditation, both in the mind and the body?
Can't remember exactly what I said with that, but to tell you what I think I mean is that
you were talking. I'll add. It's a
sure.
two-part question, so perhaps my additional part will remind you. You were talking about, of course, the pain, the cold, the extreme cold, and how it's you wanted to be warm, but also remain present with the cold. And in that section of your Dharma talk, you had been also talking about the temptation that you and we all have to build fantasy worlds during zazen or to fall asleep. And you said giving in, and when the bell rings, you are left in confusion. But if you do not give in to abstractions, building worlds, and the bell rings, and you're left in dignity and awareness, and also sticking with paying attention to the cold. So any of that, all of that, that brings something up for you that you'd like to say.
Well, in any situation we're sitting in whatever conditions are there at that moment. The moment is that it's cold outside, it's cold inside. This is how the air feels on my face. It may be uncomfortable to me, and it's and all of that's relative to whoever you are. But I'm not a fan of the cold. So in many situations in practice at both Hokyoji is one of those deep winter places. And I've sat in other deep winter places in Japan and in other uncomfortable spaces. Just the understanding that this is the reality of it, that this is what it feels like. To run away from the reality is to not be present. To settle down into your blankets and sleep away this little piece of discomfort. This little bit of discomfort is to totally miss what this discomfort can offer to you, to feel every bit of it, every bit of your life, not just the parts that you like, because you, like I said, universe doesn't care what you like. This is what it is. If you can't deal with the cold and deal with that reality on the cushion when nobody's bothering you, it's just the feel of the air. How do you get up and go into the kitchen? You can't deal with the cold. How are you going to deal with that disruption of your idea in the kitchen if you can't deal with the disruption of your idea of comfort on a cushion? You know, it's just something I think that pushes us to and back into reality. What's really happening here? There, mm, the discomfort of the body, is not suffering. I've said this before, and a friend of mine also said it. He said it in a different way. That little bit of pain is just a signal that this is what's happening in the world around you. And you can turn it into suffering, by running away from it, by dodging it, by sitting and just being miserable with it, or you can touch it and know, and be a part, and know that you understand that you are a part of this climate, this environment. The heat that your body is getting off is also affecting the world, and intermingling with um, all of these conditions, and creating the world, really creating the world in that moment. So I touch this every once in a while, and I can't really verbalize it. I can't really talk about it. But there is an understanding that the way the cold touches you, you touch the cold. And the way that you are in that room or in that space is touching everyone and everything in that room and affecting, the whole world. And it's not that simple thing of the butterfly effect. It is just the reality of what we are. This is the mix. This is the reality of it that Dogen speaks of in the Genjo
Right.
koan. And I don't know if he knew how to say it, but it's there. This is kind of it. Yeah,
Any
it's
number of
very
places.
hard to
Uh-huh.
if that is our
Right.
if that is what is meant as enlightenment, then you can't run from it. How are you running from it? How are you hiding from it in your head? And this is what I'm telling myself sometimes. When I'm sitting and I'm doing my best. Sometimes I'm not doing my best. Sometimes I am sleeping, and I have to hold that, and understand that. But if if I don't want to sleep, if I do want to be aware and awakened, then I have to be a part of all that mix and feel that cold and know that cold deeply. Not just what is my preference. Like and dislike arises, and you got to throw it down and be
Mm.
there.
Mm-hmm.
That was a
Mm-hmm.
long sing song
Mm-hmm.
bit of nonsense, but yeah, okay.
You've said of being in the temple, and with regard to Sangha, the reason we come together to sit is so that we can hear each other breathing, so that we can see the bodies and feel the weight of those bodies in the room. And I was really touched by that. Could you talk? I mean, it's almost self-exclamatory, Chimyo, but could you talk about that a little bit more?
What it brings up is my experience of being in Sangha, being um, not simply with like-minded people, and that's wonderful. Everybody doing the same, making the same effort towards awakening, um, but also reminding me that I'm not alone in this, that I am connected to all of these beings that are with me, that um, I keep saying this, these delicate bodies around me are precious, whether I'm mad at them or not, whether we had a fight in the kitchen or not. This is still, among the beings that,
Mm-hmm.
I have vowed in myself, and that the Buddha tells us that we must, now I want to say save, but that we must cherish, and that the purpose of this practice, you know, part of enlightenment is really connecting with all beings and all things in the world, and beyond, I guess. But if you can not hold even the and take care of the people and the beings around you, that is one of the most important things of practice, is to be able uh, to be with others in this practice. You know, part of my experience is sitting with people, you know, and when you sit with, you know, a sangha for a long time, even with your face turned to the wall, you can know exactly who just sat down beside you without moving your head. It doesn't have to do with the smell. You know, it's knowing, you know,
Yes.
if you can at least know the people around you and care enough to know them, um, care enough to care that they are sick or well, or that they came into the Zendo at all, or that they're missing. You know, that's important. You know, to sit next to a friend who is suffering with the flu, you know, and feeling that energy uh, of his effort, and to, I don't know, I don't know, to lend him a little bit of your strength, and know that that will be given back to you in some way, not reciprocal in always, but, you know, to know that you are held, and that you are holding, you know, the sangha, you know, that responsibility, and that, um, not dependence, not just dependence. That's not the word, but that faith in that they hold you, you know. Yeah, that's sangha. That's the purpose of sitting together.
A typical question will come, okay, we can develop relationships with literal Sangha members, but how do we develop a relationship with the community, with the wider society, whom we don't necessarily know? You've spoken about it before, and in a way you said, well, we take this vow to save all, awaken with, and save all sentient beings. But what is the face? What are the faces of those sentient beings that we see in our head when we're trying to make those vows? So perhaps could you speak about how, if there's any way, to reach, to consider the whole world as our Sangha? I hate to be grandiose, but there you go.
Well, first of all, define it as such. I mean, there's not one perfect person. Maybe the, you know, Gautama himself, you know, who saw it and could feel, and could truly feel that for every being that he encountered. Um, there are beings that we will never see, but understand that their presence. I guess this is what I mean. This is another. Hate to make this in concepts, because that's why I hate talking. You never know that, but when I say we create the we create the world, I don't really mean create, but we are the world together. You know, there are beings out there whose lives and whose movements and whose comings and goings are affecting me, whether I know it or not. That puts the responsibility on me, because here my actions, speech, thought, all of that affects the world in ways that I can't even imagine or see. So to care for all sentient beings is to try my best to stay on the Eightfold Path and, practice, the Dharma seriously and real with real effort to not cause suffering in the world for beings that even that I may not even be able to see because they are so small, so big, so far, so close. Who knows? But to go with the intent, go to the world with that intent is maybe the best that we can do because we're these limited, beings here for only a short while. It's not about just fixing everything. It's not about what that face looks like or what that body or that being looks like. You know, I think I once, said, if you have a picture in your head of what all sentient beings look like, that means you've chosen the ones you want to say because you don't know who or what you're going to encounter in this world next. You don't even know all of the beings that could possibly exist. You know, that's why, if you have your picture of the Sangha and it looks like it just looks like a certain group of people, you know, um, and that's all, whether it's a certain group of people of a certain race, of a certain background, certain idea, and if any other being, body, or face or idea messes up your picture, that's what I'm talking about. We build our little world. We create our little delusion about what we think who we think we are and what we think we're doing. If, an odd face to me, because I've never seen it before, shows up in my picture and it messes up my picture, I need to sit down and practice some more and practice hella hard because no other face can mess up your picture. No other body, no other being can mess up your picture if you are talking about all sentient beings. So everybody that walks through that door, every being that walks through that door, whether it's got tentacles or, 6 noses, you know, like the girl said, it's am I right? Always the question, why you can't accept that. Um, and maybe that's our delusion. I have the same delusions as everyone else. I see it, I see false images of of who's worthy and who's not. When there's no such thing. I think you wrote to me once about the rice. Do you wash the rice or do you wash away the rice of the wash? You don't wash away any of it. You put it all down. What's rice? What's rock? What difference does it make? You know, what's here right now? That's what's empty. What's empty.
It's it.
I can't talk about this stuff. So sorry.
And yet you did so I want to say eloquently, but I really want to say on point. And so bringing down, at least for me, bringing down any first thought I have, any preconception, and that once again, turning it, do you, if you even have an image, that's a starting point for problems. And the inclusivity of the rice and the stones together, and really that I get pulled again and again, looking at your lectures, listening to you, to the importance of doing it together, doing it not only as an individual but others together. And it's really warming and really focusing, or any number of things I could say. And so I want to thank you for that. I wanted to, our time, I don't want to keep you for over our time. And I also want to end on a beautiful little piece, as we just were discussing, or as you were just illuminating. But I did want to talk about one thing, perhaps, before we go. In the gathering of African American teachers in 2018 that you took part in at Union Theological Seminary, during the introduction, you said, of course, how precious being together with all the African American teachers was. And you also said that it gave you an opportunity to investigate your blind spots. And if you can remember, could you explain what you meant by that?
At the time, to be honest, to be in that gathering was such an eye-opening thing for me, because like so many, and I talked about this to a lot of people a lot of time, like so many people in my generation, I grew up the only one in the room, the only brown person in the room. And to walk into a room full of brown people who also understood the practice, or a practice, many different practices that come out of Buddhism or Buddhism, or whatever they're calling it now. And really realizing that I had been very isolated from my own people in this practice. I have practiced in Sanghas that basically are all white. The very first Sangha that I joined way back when, Charlotte Zen Meditation Society, and this is not a harsh statement on them, but it was a bunch of Southern white men, most of them older than me. And they did not, and it doesn't mean that I was mistreated or wasn't mistreated all the time, or that, misunderstandings didn't happen or whatever. But I had gotten used to that situation and accepted, in a sense, that situation. And even in my own Sangha in at Great Tree, I have beautiful, lovely, wonderful friends there who I love dearly. But for the most part, it was just me. And there was a point in sitting in that room with everyone and realizing how almost deprived I'd been of that. And it's not about it's not about because I'm still working through it, honestly. It's not about not having people that look just like you, but even coming to the point where you didn't even expect to see anyone. And so that was eye-opening for me. That was a blind spot for me because I had accepted something. And it kind of, and I realized how closed um, that world was becoming for me. You know, and I still don't actually know what to do about that. But I find myself now reaching, not just um, to other Black people, but now when I walk into a Sangha room, my expectation is, that it's going to be what I've known it to be is wiped away. And the absence of people of color makes that Sangha almost not a Sangha. It's like, it makes me question, what are you doing? What is the practice? And it made me question, what am I doing? What is my practice that it doesn't even include faces that look like mine? Not intentionally, but just accepting that. And that is no longer acceptable. Um, and it should never have been acceptable. And the fact that as Buddhists, as followers of Gautama, who opened the door to everything, there was no kind of person that didn't belong in that first Sangha. We had a fight about the women, okay? But in the end, there was no one that was not included in that first Sangha. So how in the hell do we get here
Indeed.
3,000 years later and it looks like this? Not acceptable. And that was my blind spot. And that was the fact that I had to own that I had accepted that the same way I had accepted it in college and high school, but that was a child back then. This is still growing, still learning, you know, and what do I do except, like you said, keep speaking the truth and keep holding that door wide open. The door to the Zendo is wide, should be wide open, you know, um, and recognizing when it's not, and speaking when it's not. And that's going to be a painful thing I can't speak of other Buddhist traditions, but for the Zen tradition, it's going to be a really, really painful
right
movement for us. And things are going to fall apart, maybe, and things are going to be, but if we make it through and we make it true, then how glorious, and I might not even be here. I may never be here. I'm not be here, but we're not going to play the game anymore. We're not going to play that anymore.
Women's focused monasteries and practice centers, and people saying, yeah, I raised my eye at the Buddha, the enlightened one, question women coming into the Sangha. Whoa,
Mm-hmm.
right? If we can keep our eyes open, you know, and stick with each other, you know, and we can do it in Zen, in all of the Sanghas, in all the various traditions. And I'm here with you now, you know, and will continue to be, with all of the supporting everybody, as just simply as there's teachers and there's students, and there's all of us together as a community. And so as we close, Chimyo, a friend asked me, well, could you ask the teacher to dedicate the merit? And so I was like, sure, I guess I could do that.
Okay.
Would you like to dedicate
well, I have to
the
say
merit?
It the way I know to say it. So
perhaps.
I don't know if it's standard or not, but
all right.
May the merit of this penetrate into each thing in all places, so that we and every sentient being together may realize the Buddha way.
Chimyo Atkinson. I want to say have fun in Brooklyn, and to thank you so much for accepting my invitation to be on Dharma of Color, and for people who are watching, her teaching activities and bio will be placed down below. And I wish you again, thank you for coming on to the podcast, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
From the bottom
It's
of my heart, I want to
you.
thank you.
Pleasure meeting you.